A profound teaching from the Buddha says, "You are your own master. Who else could be?" This seemingly simple statement holds a deep truth. Peace and happiness do not come from the outside, but rather arise from what we choose to hold on to and are willing to let go of in life. Every decision, whether it's how we live, think, or maintain relationships, shapes our inner peace and the state of our soul. As we enter old age, many liken this stage of life to the golden autumn, a time to pause, reflect on what is past, enjoy tranquility, and find joy in the simple things. However, just as a garden must be cleared of weeds for flowers to bloom, so must our minds be cleared of toxic relationships, even if those relationships involve longtime friends, relatives, or loved ones. Not everyone in our lives brings positivity. Some people are like warm sunlight, helping us grow and become stronger daily. But others are like dark clouds, leaving us feeling downcast, drained, and emotionally exhausted. If we are not mindful enough to recognize and let go of these harmful connections, we can easily be pulled into a cycle of fatigue and hurt, especially when our health and time are no longer as abundant as they once were. That is why today, let us take a moment to reflect, with honesty and compassion for ourselves, to recognize 5 types of people you should avoid in old age, even if they are family. By doing so, you protect your inner peace and uphold your dignity, honor your personal journey, and enjoy this later stage of life with greater clarity, lightness, and freedom, free from unnecessary emotional burdens. 1. The irresponsible person, those who only take without learning to stand on their own 2 feet. In life, especially in old age, you may encounter people, whether they are relatives, children, or friends, who frequently come to you for help or rescue. They might complain about financial troubles, ask for advice on personal matters, or rely on you to fix problems they created. They often say things like, "This will be the last time. I promise I'll change," or "Just help me one more time." But things always end up the same. Promises are easy to make, but change rarely follows. When help is given too often without genuine reflection or effort from the receiver, it slowly turns into a burden, not only financially, but also emotionally. You may feel drained of energy, guilty if you refuse, and exhausted if you continue. Ultimately, you become the one bearing the consequences for their actions, while they never truly grow up or take responsibility for their own lives. In the teachings of the Buddha, there is a fundamental principle that every practitioner must remember. Each person is the owner of their karma. Each must bear the consequences of their actions. This is a reminder of the law of cause and effect, and a warning about the boundary between compassion and untimely interference. When you continuously reach out to help someone, no matter how sincere your compassion may be, to shield them from the consequences of their choices, you are, perhaps unknowingly, interrupting their spiritual growth. Suffering and stumbling are not punishments, but essential parts of the awakening journey. If someone is not allowed to face the outcomes of their actions or take responsibility for their life, they will not be able to learn the lessons necessary for true transformation and maturity. Many people confuse compassion with overprotection, believing that to love someone means to constantly sacrifice, to carry their burdens, and to always be there whenever they call. But true compassion does not come with indulgence. It must be grounded in wisdom. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is to stop at the right moment, to say no gently yet firmly. Not because you are indifferent, but because you understand that only when someone is allowed to face the consequences of their actions can they begin their true journey of transformation. Setting clear boundaries with irresponsible individuals is not selfish. It is protecting your mental well-being and self-worth, especially when you've reached an age where peace matters more than endless emotional turmoil. It is also a gift to the other person, a chance to pause, reflect, and learn to stand independently and take responsibility for their life. Remember, love is not always about helping. It is sometimes about giving someone the space they need to grow through the challenges they must face. 2. The ungrateful person. When kindness is taken for granted. Few things hurt more quietly than giving your heart to help someone, only to be met with indifference, coldness, or worse, a sense of entitlement. Ungrateful people often fail to see the effort and sacrifices you've made. To them, what you do seems expected, like an obligation, and over time, they no longer feel the need to say thank you, because they assume you'll always be there when they need something. The feeling of being taken for granted may not strike immediately. Still, it gradually builds into disappointment, sadness, and even self-doubt. Was I wrong to help them? Or, why don't they appreciate what I've done? When kindness is not acknowledged, the joy of giving begins to fade. What once made you feel warm and fulfilled slowly becomes a source of emotional fatigue and quiet heartbreak. In Buddhist teachings, it is said, "Giving is an act that arises from compassion, not from a desire for reward." The willingness to give unconditionally is the foundation of true happiness. However, this does not mean we must silently endure when our kindness is taken for granted or exploited by those who lack appreciation. To give does not mean to give blindly. Offering with a selfless heart is a noble practice. But in this world of interconnected human relationships, gratitude, even just a warm glance or a sincere thank you, holds great importance. It is more than a simple courtesy. It is a subtle energy nourishing us with kindness. When our efforts are acknowledged, it gives us strength and encouragement to continue living with integrity and compassion. On the other hand, when kindness repeatedly falls into a void of indifference, where the recipient fails to see its value, the giver will, sooner or later, feel disheartened. Not because they seek recognition, but because every human deserves to feel respected when they offer part of their heart and sincerity. So, if you realize that your help only makes others more dependent, ungrateful, or indifferent, allow yourself to pause. That does not diminish the value of your kindness. On the contrary, it reflects your awareness. Kindness needs to be placed where it belongs, with those who cherish and honor it to continue growing and spreading goodness in the world. Redirect your compassion toward those who truly know how to receive it, even if they are quiet souls with humble hearts. It is they, through their silent appreciation or small acts of kindness in return, who will help you rediscover the true joy of giving. Not for recognition, not to be remembered, but simply because it brings you peace to know your goodness has been planted in the fertile soil of gratitude. 3. The manipulative person. Those who cleverly disguise selfishness beneath the mask of affection and obligation. Imagine this: sitting in the familiar calm of a late afternoon, soft sunlight filtering through the window, a warm cup of tea in your hands, and your heart feels at peace. Then suddenly, the phone rings. On the other end is a relative, once again, reaching out with that all too familiar tone. "Just this one time. Could you help me?" You sigh, hesitate momentarily, but eventually say yes. Because you just can't say no. At first, you believe you're doing something kind, and perhaps you are. But over time, you begin to realize that these requests are no longer rooted in real need. They happen again and again, growing more frequent, becoming a pattern. The other person doesn't truly need your help. They crave convenience. And you, being the one with the softest heart, have become their most reliable fallback. Manipulative people don't always raise their voices or behave rudely. They can be very polite, even affectionate. But behind that demeanor lies an unconscious, or sometimes intentional strategy to win your agreement by stirring up feelings of guilt, responsibility, or familial obligation. They make you feel that if you say no, You are the bad one, the cold, ungrateful person. And so you continue to sacrifice and say yes, even though deep down a quiet unease is growing within you. In Buddhist teachings, compassion is regarded as a noble quality, but that does not mean you must accept everything, regardless of how others treat you. True compassion does not mean weakness, indulgence, or allowing others to take advantage of your kindness. On the path of mindfulness and spiritual growth, there is an essential lesson for each of us. Knowing how to set boundaries is an act of wisdom, not selfishness. A boundary set at the right time, with calm, clarity, and without resentment, is like a protective fence around the garden of your soul, shielding it from being overrun by negative emotions. It is not meant to push anyone away, but rather to gently remind the other person that you too are a human being of value, worthy of peace and respect. Sometimes your choice to stop, to no longer comply or enable, becomes the moment that gives the other person a chance to reflect on their behavior and begin a path of true change. Peace is not something that simply arrives because we wish for it. It results from a long journey, a process of letting go, healing past wounds, and steadily strengthening the mind and heart. It is not an easy journey, but it is a worthwhile one. And once you have touched that peace, you must learn to guard it like a precious treasure, not allowing anyone, no matter how close, to drag you back into the whirlpool of guilt, pressure, or subtle manipulation. Remember, saying no is not cutting off love. It is a mature form of love that allows both you and the other person to grow. It is a gentle yet firm affirmation. I respect you, but I must also respect myself. And sometimes, that boundary becomes your greatest gift, not in material form, but as an awakening. 4. The self-absorbed person. When a relationship becomes a one-sided mirror. One of the profound teachings of the Buddha reminds us, true connection comes from mutual empathy and understanding. However, not everyone is willing or even able to step out of their inner world to truly listen and connect with others. There are people who, though they may not have bad intentions, live so deeply within their egos that every conversation becomes a stage centered around them. You may have experienced this before. Whenever you try to share a story, an emotion, or a personal struggle, you are quickly interrupted. The other person swiftly redirects the conversation to their own issues, memories, or pain. Over time, you begin to realize that you are not truly seen or heard in this relationship. You become a bystander, a quiet shadow in a dialogue meant to be mutual. People who tend to withdraw into themselves are not necessarily bad or intentionally hurtful. They may have experienced deep emotional wounds, grown up in environments lacking care, or had their feelings dismissed, which led them to never truly learn how to listen to others fully. In many cases, they simply don't know how to form healthy, reciprocal connections. Nevertheless, regardless of the cause, their impact on relationships is often the same. You begin to feel overlooked, unappreciated, and eventually invisible in a bond you have wholeheartedly invested in. They often unconsciously turn every conversation into a stage for themselves, where you are merely the audience, and they are the center of attention. You may be interrupted, dismissed, or quickly redirected back to their stories whenever you try to open up. Over time, you don't just lose the chance to express yourself. You begin to lose the sense that you fully exist within the relationship. In such situations, the most important thing is to remain aware that your voice matters and that you deserve to be heard. Patience is a noble virtue, but when it is not accompanied by self-respect, it can become a trap that slowly causes you to lose yourself. Don't stay silent for too long just to keep the peace, because prolonged silence often turns into resignation, and from there, quiet sadness begins to grow. Learn to speak up gently but clearly. Sometimes, a simple, honest statement like, "I need a space to share," or "I feel like I haven't really been heard," can spark a small turning point. If the other person is open and caring, they pause, listen, and try to change. However, stepping back to protect yourself is not selfish or cold if you've voiced your feelings many times, and they continue to revert to their old ways, continuing to overshadow you with their ego. On the contrary, it is the action of someone awakened who knows how to love and care for themselves deeply. You don't necessarily need to end the relationship, but you can adjust the distance so that your spirit has the space to heal, to be heard, and to fully be yourself. 5. The critic. When concern in disguise can make you lose yourself. Not all wounds come from actions. Sometimes, a single word can leave a lasting mark on the soul. This is especially true when those words come from people you trust, love, or have shared meaningful parts of your life with. Critics don't always raise their voices or lash out. They may speak gently, often under the guise of caring for you or wanting what's best for you. But behind that soft tone lie tiny, persistent needles that slowly pierce your self-confidence. They comment on your choices, your job, health, children, lifestyle, as if you are never quite good enough. At first, their words may cause you to reflect and question yourself, but over time, they can gradually erode your sense of self-belief. You start hesitating with each decision, afraid you'll make a mistake, be judged, or worse, you begin to ask yourself, "Am I not good enough?" A critic is not necessarily cruel. Sometimes they are victims of their own doubt and fear, projecting their views onto others as a subtle form of control. But that does not mean you have to accept everything they say. In the teachings of the Buddha, we learn, words are like arrows. They can only wound us if we allow them to pierce our hearts. Mindfulness teaches us how to remain grounded in the face of adversity. When confronted with criticism, instead of reacting with anger or retreating into silence, you can remain calm and respond gently. "I understand your point of view, but I trust the path I've chosen." A simple statement, yet it carries the strength of self-respect and awareness. You don't need to argue to prove your worth. You only need clarity within yourself. Remember, old age is a time to live lightly and peacefully, not to continue living under the shadow of judgment. Setting boundaries in response to criticism is a way to protect your emotional well-being and a powerful act of honoring yourself and the long journey of growth you've walked to get here. Here is the English translation of your paragraph with correct grammar and a serene, reflective tone. In life's journey, especially as we enter the restful stage of old age, the most precious thing we can preserve is not wealth or status, but inner peace. To protect that peace, we must learn an essential skill that is not always easy to practice: the ability to choose our relationships wisely and have the courage to let go of those that cause harm. Some relationships were once a source of comfort and warmth, but over time they change, or perhaps we have changed. When a relationship makes you feel small, exhausted, or no longer like yourself, that is a sign to pause and reflect, not with anger, but with mindfulness and compassion for your well-being. As the Buddha taught, peace does not come from the outside. It arises from within through inner cultivation and discipline. If we constantly seek validation, harmony, or comfort from others without listening to our inner voice, we will be trapped in a cycle of disappointment and hurt. True peace is not found in being liked by everyone, but in living in alignment with your values, whether in solitude or among many. Allow yourself to live a lighter life, one where you keep only the connections that truly nourish your soul, that bring understanding, respect, and positive energy. It's not that you are cold or distant, but rather that you have learned that your inner peace is the foundation of a calm, steady, and joyful life.